American shoppers, we expect everybody to be Amazon.
Right,
If I
right.
order something from you and it's not there in 3 days, I'm
Thanks for joining us today, guys, on the Elation podcast, where we enjoy exhilarating euphoria through creation and collaboration. Today, we're here with Meneray. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you.
Good to
Thanks
see
for having
you.
me today.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on the podcast. Excited to talk about music and a bunch of other things. But let's start with your origin story. Where are you from?
Sure. So I grew up here in New Orleans. I grew up in Uptown. My father taught at Tulane for many years. My mother taught at Newman School, and
Okay.
so I grew up.
So that's really uptown.
Really uptown. Yeah, almost on Tulane campus.
That's awesome.
I always say people know the Boot who are here in New Orleans. The Boot Bar, almost right there on Broadway. I grew up about a block from the Boot.
Gotcha.
So sort of right in the hub of the campus and the activities.
Absolutely. That's a great place to grow up.
It certainly had its charms. There's no question about it.
Yeah. I feel like there's parts of New Orleans that are true New Orleans, and that is a part of it, for sure. I almost feel like growing up in Lakeview, I didn't necessarily grow up in New Orleans, but because it's a whole different feel,
A whole different feel.
A whole different feel. Where school did you go to?
So I went to Newman for high school, and then I went to Tulane for university.
Okay. And what'd you study?
I studied history, actually.
History.
I had the original plan that I would go and teach, probably teach in high school. I never really was as interested in like the hardcore research that college professors do, but I like to talk. I was always interested in, I don't know, facts and communication and that sort of thing.
What was your favorite time period?
I was always really interested in a couple different things. One, the early days of New Orleans. I've always been very interested in the culture of New Orleans, and so that Spanish and French era before we became part of the United States was always interesting to me. And then
the Pirate City.
The Pirate City,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
exactly.
being a historian, this will tickle your fancy, I think. So I have a little bit of history in my family lineage for the Pirate City. So my great one of the greats uncles was Nat Chickazola, who was Gene Lafitte the Pirate's first mate.
Aha!
And there's actually still a couple Chickazolas still down in Lafitte.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
They found a place they liked.
They found a place they liked and stayed, So, got a little bit of pirate in my blood. But I've always, that's one thing I've loved about New Orleans is we became a pirate city. So we are the place that accepts everything,
That's right. And I think that's one of the reasons that the art scene in the city is so vibrant and flourishing is that it takes different cultures and brings them together. And everyone's pretty much into whatever you're doing. It's not like, oh, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. It's like, hey, if you're doing it the way that makes you happy, to gives you elation, as we might say.
There you go.
Then go for it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that's why artists have always found it such a welcoming environment.
Well, and we're no place to drown out new ideas. I mean, any place that can turn a pirate into a general is pretty creative, if you ask me, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. Well, so what started your journey in music?
Yeah, so after I got out of school, I wanted to take a little bit of time off, and I ended up doing some marketing over actually in Austin, Texas, and this is in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was interesting. And then I came back to New Orleans. I wanted to get back to the city. I did miss the culture here. And Austin was fun, but it wasn't like the culture of New Orleans.
It's
especially
different.
With
it's different.
The live music and the club scene at the time at Tipitina's, Mermaid Lounge, Jimmy's, Maple Leaf, etc. Those are places that I always really liked. And so when I got a chance to come back to the city, I got a job working for the Arts Council of New Orleans, and they were looking to develop a business program. They'd gotten some small money from the National Endowment for the Arts, and they wanted to do a series of trainings about how to teach artists to be better with their business so they could, flourish, not necessarily have to work a second job, etc. They
it's very needed around here.
It was very needed.
Yeah.
And I was experienced enough and also willing to work for the very small amount of money they initially had. So they offered me the job and I took it.
Gotcha.
And came back here and really started to develop a lot of the programs that ultimately became Ella Project, which is our organization that we spun off as its own independent organization in 2016.
Gotcha. Well, it's one thing that I try to tell musicians all the time, or up and coming artists. They ask me what's the most important thing that they need to do to learn, or to blow up, or whatever it may be. And I always tell them, build your foundation, which is in turn is your business. Make sure that you have your paperwork straight for all your song splits. Make sure that you're actually registering the songs with your publishing companies. Make sure the little things are done that can actually write the check for you, so that you're just not making music and it's going out in the world and there's nothing coming back to you. So the business part of it, in my opinion, is one of the most important things to learn, because the music's going to come to you if you're creative.
Yeah, you're speaking our language there. Is the idea that, the music business is also complicated. There's a lot of different avenues that you have to go down. There's a lot of different
There's a lot of different checks that can come
middlemen,
to
in
you
all
if you
honesty.
register things properly.
There are. But no one ever teaches you that.
No.
If you go and you get a degree in music, that's not really being taught. A lot of our musicians obviously are self-taught.
Right.
They come up informally. It's a young person's business, especially in the beginning.
Right.
So you have people that are, teenagers who are out there touring, releasing music, and this information is never something that's given to them.
Right.
And so this is why organizations like ours exist. We try and get the information into the hands of the people that need it, and we don't charge to do it. And we always say, it's just like the ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. It's so much better to get people on the front end.
Absolutely.
In the early stages of their career, get them set up with, as you were talking about, the performing rights organizations. If they're songwriters, get them set up with the music licensing collective. Make sure that the copyrights are where they need to be. Teach them how to do a split sheet.
Sync licensing.
When that
Yeah.
becomes an opportunity, 100%.
Yeah.
Because, as every music supervisor who's ever talked to has always told us, they put that in at the very end of a movie or a TV show. And if the music isn't 100% cleared, they just move on.
They move on.
They don't have time to wait for you to say, well, let me see if I call this person. And,
Yeah, well,
I think I got something on my phone. It's like, no, if you
100%.
can't
Well,
warrant
and
it,
that's
I
why
gotta go.
that's why they work with, a lot of times they work with the same people over and over
Sure.
again, because the contracts are easy, everything's easy, everything is known and done, and they'll just work. They'd rather work with someone that makes the business easy than necessarily the best song.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the same thing is with any sort of performance. When you're talking about that professionalism, the same thing can even come when you're just playing a live gig, for instance.
Absolutely.
If it's like, well, I know this person's going to be on time. I know they're going to have their act together. I know they're going to show up and they're not
Yep.
going to be drunk.
Yep.
Okay, maybe that band over there could be better, but here I know I've got what I need.
Yeah.
And so that professionalism is really key to people making it a career instead of just, something that you do every once
Absolutely.
in a while.
And it's part of studio etiquette, you don't learn studio etiquette at school. You learn it in studios, and you learn watching other people, how they act, how they react, when you can say things, when you don't say things, when to speak up and be creative, when to take a back seat and just learn. Like, there's so many things in the studio that I feel like it changes in the minute basis, that you kind of have to flow with it, and you can't learn that in school. So that studio etiquette is also showing up to the sessions on time.
Absolutely.
It's one of the biggest gripes that I hear from like studio musicians in Nashville and LA. When they come down here, things are a little lackadaisical when it comes to showing up on time, or everybody having everything they need when they get there, or not bringing extra people, or not being not drunk when you show up. Like, there's just a lot of things that professionalism that real musicians or working musicians treat it like a job.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of it is just thinking about it as courtesy as well. I mean, if I'm here on time and you're 15 minutes late, then you're saying you're more important than I am.
Right.
And that doesn't make me feel that good.
Right. Absolutely. No, and creatives, we feel everything. So,
Yes.
and there are big stories that even big people, they don't necessarily show up to a session on time. I know, Eminem has not shown up, or not waited longer than 5 minutes for anybody. And those are, he just treats it like a 9 to 5 job. If you're not there, you're not there. It's over with,
Hard to argue
You
with that.
You lost the opportunity, 100%. But it's very important for us to, as creatives, to learn that side of the brain.
Yeah, and so what we look to do is we take a couple different routes to do that. One is through seminars, webinars, podcasts like this, and then we also do direct legal services, and those are pro bono. So you're not paying for access to our legal team. And my partner Ashley Keaton, who's a intellectual property lawyer by trade, she also teaches copyright law at Tulane Law School, and so she's very well respected and credentialed and et cetera. And we're lucky enough to be able to hire her
Right.
to provide services to the musicians of Louisiana. And of course, we're based in New Orleans. We work a lot with New Orleans musicians, but we serve everybody in all 64 parishes of Louisiana.
Gotcha.
Modern communication, it really doesn't matter if you're zooming with us from 3 blocks away from our office or if you're up in Monroe. The communication is going to be the same, and we're always looking to serve everybody anywhere. So if people need help with registering copyrights, with negotiating a contract, with a sync license, with a licensing deal, with getting their publishing company set up or get registered with BMI, or if it's a situation where things have potentially gone a little bit sideways, where they haven't gotten paid for a gig, or they someone has used some of their songs without permission.
Right.
These are things that we can address as well. And again, we don't charge for the services, so the services are available to everyone. It is for moderate income artists. We're not looking to provide free services for people making $500,000 a year.
Well, I was gonna say, how do you weed them out?
Yeah, I mean there are some guidelines for pro bono, but in all honesty, they're pretty generous, and especially in a state like Louisiana, where the wages are lower than they are in California and New York. The vast majority of musicians who are just everyday working class musicians are totally going to qualify.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's definitely one of the most important things to build that music culture down here, because we can't have a city taken seriously in the music business without that type of culture. And I always, we had two of the biggest, and we've had other labels come out of here too, before them, but Cash Money and No Limit were two of the biggest music labels to ever be, and they're not here. There's no label building here. There's no A&Rs to walk into and get information from. There's very few outlets for these musicians to go to learn this stuff. So, to create that culture is what we need.
It absolutely is. And you're absolutely right. I mean, over the years, New Orleans never developed as a studio town, really. It certainly never developed as a label town. And the current economy in 2025, as you've seen, especially the labels become less relevant these days, we're kind of now all in the same boat. And maybe that's not a great boat to be in. We can all sit there and be like, man, you should have been here in the 60s. It was great for the artists with the labels were really kicking it.
Right.
But back then, they had a lot of complaints as well.
Right, 100%.
And there was all sorts of discussions about unsavory business practices.
Well, the artists didn't know about masters back then until Ray Charles and those guys came and changed some things.
So I think the moral of it is wherever you are right now, make sure that you're taking care of yourself and not entrusting someone else to do it, whether it be a label, whether it be a PR person or anything. Just know your own business.
Well,
and be ready to communicate with it on literate terms.
Right, that's the thing. There's more information and access because of the way communication is nowadays, but that means also you have to wear more hats.
100%.
So if you're lacking even just on the business side, you're also probably lacking on how to market yourself. You're also probably lacking on, what type of filming I should be doing to go viral. You're lacking on a lot of things that once again go through experience and have people testing things all the time. When in LA, was one of the things that I learned was there are artists that tried this 4, 5, 6, 7 different times with different names, different genres, different aspects of the character, all kinds of things. It doesn't work one way, they shut it down, do it again. And by doing that, you're manipulating the system because you're just trying to find a niche that you fit in. And it doesn't matter how it works. You're just trying to find that niche. And I feel like the industry does that a lot. Like even like some of their bigger singers, like this last year, Shabuzi, the song that came out that was huge. He's an R&B singer. He didn't start doing country until someone gave him a country song, and it became a hit. Now he's out singing country, So The Weeknd was an R&B artist and like a genuine like kind of like 90s R&B artist, and they turned him into a pop star, So like it, you have to learn to keep trying, keep moving forward, keep getting information, and learn every hat. And that's the difference. You are your own label now.
You absolutely are. And that does allow with a lot of artistic freedom in a lot of ways, too.
Right.
It does give you a chance to try things. And I think that that is a nice position that New Orleans artists have always been in as well. That because we didn't necessarily, it wasn't an industry town, there weren't these ideas that, oh, well, this pop song's got to be 3 minutes and 45
Right.
seconds.
Right.
And, you need, 3 backup singers, you need 2 white women and 1 black man.
Right.
And, it's all formula. It was sort of like, well, you got do what you're into. And if the audience comes with you, then we'll be there too. And I think there's a lot of that these days that goes on everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's where when people are always like, well, how do we break out? It's like, well, nobody really knows. And there's so many different aspects of it: preparation, talent, luck, and everything gets thrown together in a stew. And some of it works and some of it doesn't.
Right.
And you've got incredibly talented artists who do have their act together that never break,
Absolutely.
and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Ones that you're like, how does this person? Why is it this way? And that's just the nature of the business.
I'd rather be lucky than good, right?
Sometimes, sometimes, absolutely.
But that back end is, I always say the foundation builds the money doesn't build the foundation. So you have to have that back end knowledge of, even if I'm trying things for it to blow up, if it does blow up, you can actually use it and utilize it. But there's a lot of kids that blow up on TikTok for one song and don't know how to go anywhere from there.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's where it's always challenging, is figuring out how to really build an audience of your core fans. And the nice thing today, because it's so easier to get that information out to people that might be into you, is that if you spend the time to really nail it down and figure out, like, all right, who is coming to my shows?
Right.
What are they into? What are their friends into? What are some other ways that I can try and connect with them? Then you could end up with fans in Slovakia.
Right.
You could end up with, people that 40 years ago would never know that you existed, but now they'll find you.
Right.
And they'll watch you on YouTube. They'll see you on TikTok. And if you happen to come to their town, they'll come out and see you, no matter what the ticket price is.
Right, absolutely. No, and it has definitely opened up the world for exposure. I still think it's better and more beneficial for artists to go back to the trunk sale, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like and obviously it's a different sale, but when you attach to someone personally or locally, I feel like the following's better. I feel like you get the person who comes to the show, buys a ticket, buys a shirt, buys the album, and actually appreciates the show and then leaves. Those moments are few and far in between because of how we listen to music nowadays. So I feel like if you can get that base of that 500,000, 1,500 people, of local people that truly drive you, you can have a career forever.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And those true fans are what really make it work. And, and some of those true fans, we'll see, like New Orleans can be local, but not always.
Right,
I mean,
right.
we have people that come down 3 or 4 times a year that are just huge music fans.
Right.
They'll come to Jazz Fest, they'll come to Blues and Barbecue in the fall, they'll come to Satchmo Fest in the summertime. They may live in Toronto, they may
Right.
live in Seattle, but they are your true fans, and they'll come dig you. And that's the nice thing also, I think, about being in this community that does have a brand that has secondary recognition.
Right.
There's 2 things about it. I think one is, like, especially if you're a jazz player from New Orleans, like, you better be good.
Right.
because the standard level is extremely
High.
high
Yep.
amongst the contemporaries and amongst the booking agents and everyone like that. Also, the benefit though is if you are good, then you can go into a club in Sweden, and if it says Gene Meneray from New Orleans, there are going to be people going to come, and if it
Right.
says Gene Meneray from Memphis, maybe they're like, yeah, whatever. I've
Right.
never heard of that. It's not going to be my jam. But
100%.
all of a
Which
sudden, we've got an engaged
it's
audience.
funny you brought up Memphis because that's one thing that bothers me is that we are in the Memphis chapter of the Grammys. I've been telling Reed, I've been on his ass about it. We need our own situation because it just doesn't make sense if you ask me. But well, let's talk a little bit about some things you've done in the city with. I know you've done some really creative things like with the Mardi Gras Indians and helped them with their copyright stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the things, Ella Project, of course, we're well known for our work in music, but we're not purely a music organization. We work with visual artists, filmmakers, writers, nonprofit organizations, and a lot of the same intellectual property principles that we've talked about for music apply to the same for the other types of art as well.
Right.
And so for the work that we did with the Mardi Gras Indian community, what we wanted to look at was that the suits were actually works of visual art that were eligible for copyright protection. Without getting too much in the weeds of copyright law, functional items are not eligible for copyright protection. This chair, for instance, you can't copyright.
Right.
If it's considered functional, clothing, you can't copyright. So if it's considered functional, it's not copyrightable. There are some other protections, but we don't need to get into
Right.
that. You can't call it art. So the idea was with the suits is that they were in fact art. And the key, and Ashley came up with this, and I thought it was really brilliant, was because the suits were so heavy, because they were so hot, because when a chief would go out on Mardi Gras Day, he'd have to have 2 or 3 handlers with him so they could hand off the crown at certain breaks and get water to him. She said, this is not functional clothing. This is not a costume. Like, no one would wear this for any reason except that they had to as part of the tradition. It's actually quite a hassle to wear these suits. And that was the key with the Copyright Office. Is at first they looked at it, they go, it's a costume, you can't copyright costumes. And she goes, no, it's actually 3-dimensional sculpture that just happens to be worn.
Wow.
And so they went with it. And so then that was really important for a lot of reasons. And it's less important just for the pure business sense of it, in my opinion, because, there is then the ability for the Indians to work with photographers and to license the photographs that contain their suits because the suits are copyrighted. But in all honesty, there's some name, image, and likeness avenues they could have pursued anyway.
Right.
For me, the most important thing was that you had, a group of people that had traditionally not been treated well by the United States government, that had traditionally been denigrated. And, for a long time in this city, too, it seems crazy now because, of course, we've got the Mardi Gras Indian Queen designing the Super Bowl logo, and they're everywhere. But, 50 or 60 years ago, this was not a tradition that the city really embraced either. So for then the U.S. government, through their Copyright Office, to give those people a certificate that says the U.S. government recognizes this as artwork, that probably is just as important as the ability to license the works to a local photographer and make $75 would be. And then I do also think that contributed to more of the suits ending up in museum collections. I mean, you've seen them then in Prospect Biennial. You've seen them in museums in Paris and Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. and God, all over the place these days. And, that was a part of it. And, for us, the work that we do, we're always very cautious to say, we don't create the artwork, right? The artists create the artwork, and we help find them the best way to get it out to the public in a manner of their choosing. So that's our role. So the Indian suits were art, regardless of whether or not we figured out a way to get the government to sign off on it. but getting the government to sign off on it
No,
was a nice
it
little
gives it
benefit,
gives it a great foundation of future cultural experiences. In my opinion, it kind of anchors them into a situation where you can preserve the culture now. So I feel like it actually probably made them feel a little bit better about just what they're doing and the history that they get to expose by doing it. It's going to be safe because
100%.
you
I
know
think the psychic benefit of that was really strong.
yeah,
And I do think that it played a significant role in the current embrace of that art form, of that only in New Orleans art form that has become treasured, but wasn't always treasured. And it's
right.
been an interesting journey to be a part of.
What do you think? For me, especially running like the L project that brings in so many people to do pro bono work for some of these artists. How do you feel like your relationships have helped with that, with building relationships in the city and your businesses and stuff like that? Has that really helped impact the ability to broaden the work?
I hope so. I mean, I think that there's a lot of attorneys, small businesses, etc., that, if they're in New Orleans, they're probably in New Orleans because they have some appreciation of the culture. It doesn't mean that they have to be someone who's, gotten the brass pass and
Right,
going to the Maple Leaf 50 times a year or anything
right,
like that, but there's probably some hook to the culture of New Orleans that's why they've decided to make their career
absolutely,
here. And so I think that we can then provide them an entry point in a lot of ways
right,
where, they're a corporate attorney. They do a lot of complicated merger and acquisitions deals with clients all over the country. Some of them they don't even meet, right? They take a couple hours. They work with a musician who needs to set up an LLC.
right,
It doesn't really take them a lot of time, but they get to really interact with that musician. They get to really know that person. And I think that's a nice benefit for them. And then in turn, hopefully for the musician as well, they can grow their network. And that's
absolutely,
one of the reasons. So the way that we do our legal services is we have a partnership with Tulane Law School. And this goes back from the very early days of founding the organization. In fact, Tulane was the person who gave us our first small stipend of funding. So they've been a supporter since day one. And we bring in about 30 interns a year to help work directly with the clients. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And it's not necessarily purely for their legal knowledge because they're law students still. And
right,
there are some benefits that they bring to that process. But for me, it's just as important to make sure that these law students, who a lot of times you end up in a bubble of studying, there's a lot of work.
right,
Law school is not easy, and we all appreciate that. And you end up going to a school in New Orleans, but you never actually experience New Orleans. You
right.
never really get to learn what the music and culture is about. Maybe that attracts you when you're trying to choose your school, but then,
But then, yeah,
school happens, and
absolutely,
before you know it, you graduated and you're off to somewhere else.
right,
So the students that work with us, like, okay, well now you're talking to the creators of New Orleans culture every week,
right.
and you're seeing what they're working on, and you're seeing the struggles that they have and the successes that they have. And I think that then in turn gives us the opportunity to seed fans and potential supporters of New Orleans culture as they move on in their careers. We're
Absolutely.
getting them at 25, 26, 27. 10 years down the road, they've now made partner. They're actually making some decent money. All right. Are they now more interested in serving on a nonprofit board for culture
Right.
in New Orleans or in wherever they may be? Or are they interested in, paying premium tickets to go see some of our artists on the road, buying some of their paintings? We know they are
Right.
because we stay in touch with them, and it's
Right.
not 100%, but it's a very nice number that we introduce these law students to the culture, and then they become lifelong fans and advocates. And to me, that's invaluable.
Absolutely. Well, but it's also real world experience too.
Totally.
I mean, you can't get so wrapped up in your book learning that you don't realize how to apply it when you leave law school. So if you're actually seeing the struggles of a musician or musicians, and that's the avenue you're going to help with law, then knowing the real stories will help you apply everything that you've just learned. So I feel like it's a really important part of the process.
It is, and cheers to Tulane. You know, Tulane does require them to do a certain number of hours. When we bring in students, we tell them it's going to be more hours. You know, if you want to get your 50 hours and then move on, there are other programs you can do that,
Right.
but we need you for the whole semester. And, you know, fortunately, we're very popular with the law students. So
Do you work with Lee Sher over there at all?
I know Lee a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we're in different worlds as far as that's concerned, but yeah,
Because I know he
absolutely.
teaches
He does.
over there for law, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not entertainment based though, is it?
No,
No.
I think
Okay.
he's a business transactional guy.
That's right. Yeah.
Stuff that's probably a little bit above our our usual
Boy,
line of
he's
work.
yeah, absolutely. I've
But charming gentleman. He was on the board of the Arts Council when I was working there, and I
Gotcha.
got to know him a little bit then.
Yeah, close family friend. Loves,
Oh,
lovely.
excellent.
Yeah, lovely. But yeah, I know he was teaching law over there. That's why I had to ask. Yeah, no, Tulane's great. I feel like they are a very creative school. I feel like they do a lot in the creative lane. They also give back to the city a lot.
They do, and you know, New Orleans is really blessed because of that. You know, I mean, we have Tulane, we have Xavier, whose visual arts department is renowned,
Right.
who's doing great things in nonprofit management as well. Loyola, my wife's a Loyola grad, so I have to shout them out for
Yep.
them. When we talk about pro bono as a Jesuit school, you know, they drill it into their students from day one that like you are given a lot of power and privilege by having a law license, and you have to use it to help out everyone. And you know that's been a motto
That's
of that
great.
school since the beginning.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
and UNO too. You know they do a great job with arts administration. I taught there for 8 years and really enjoyed my time teaching in the graduate school. And they've given us so many new administrators and grant program officers here. So we're really lucky to have all the institutions that we do.
Absolutely. No, and it New Orleans is just, when you don't have to grow up here to love the culture. You can come down and experience it once and never want to leave this place. I mean, I feel like I moved away multiple times, but I always had to come back. It was always something that just brings you back. Because I think you go out and you experience other cities, other cultures, and other things. You just realize how special this place really is.
There's nothing quite like it. And I think what you said is so important is that for people that really want to, you know, dive into the culture, it's not that hard.
No.
You know, this is not one of those cities where you have to go, oh, well, you know, I have to learn how to meet this person who's then going to introduce you with that person who's going to introduce you with that person.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm going to actually get to experience. Most of the world's culture, you just show up.
Right.
And if you're like, hey, I'm into this, and everyone's like, yeah, that's cool. I'm into it too.
Right.
Like, let's do it together.
Absolutely.
That's kind of unique, I
It's
think.
the easiest place to network because
Totally.
everyone here is willing to talk and willing to experience, I guess the little bits of information they can learn from you, and they just enjoy people, and you go to a place like LA, which was great for me for business and other things, but personally it was just not, it wasn't the same because you can't go into a bar randomly, sit down and watch a football game and start talking to the guy next to you and actually have a meaningful conversation and enjoy that connection with just random people. They look at you like, why are you talking to me? It's like it's just a different experience. But down here, literally, you can just go sit at any bar and you'll experience the culture somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just show up.
Just show up,
That's what I
right.
tell people when
Yeah.
they're like, what are some tips? Well, just show up.
Just show up.
See what happens.
So, well, since we're on that about other cities, what did your work with South Arts teach you about the music industry in other cities?
That was interesting. So we were fortunate enough several years ago, South Arts was developing a new funding program called Jazz Road, which has been very helpful to a lot of New Orleans musicians, and I think will continue to be, where, they will fund musicians to go on tours to, places where maybe the free market wouldn't support it, go to smaller communities, play in unusual venues. And they also had a residency component of that as well. But the whole idea was to find a way to bring jazz to communities outside of the sort of hub cities for jazz,
Right.
in a way that was a little bit different. And so they brought Ella Project on as a consultant for the project. And one of the things that we did is we went around to 6 different cities and we just met with musicians and talked about, got a better idea. What's the jazz scene like here in Boston or Kansas City or Los Angeles? And it was illuminating in a lot of ways, and I think really helped influence our work in New Orleans. I mean, the first one is, because I do think there's a lot of, and for good reason, New Orleans artists that are like, we never became Nashville, we never became Austin, and God, we screwed this all up, and it's not working here. And again, that's not totally wrong. But I don't think it's anywhere close to the full picture.
Right.
And doing the conversations with Jazz Road was really confirmed that music, especially jazz music, is complicated everywhere.
Right.
That in a lot of ways, especially when you talk about live audiences, we had a stronger support than they would have. It wouldn't be unusual when we were talking to musicians in Boston for them to be playing, to 5 people.
Right.
There was a band that we talked to when we were in DC who actually paid for the opportunity to get on stage. The idea was that it wasn't the club owners paying them to draw an audience. They were like, hey, and this was a band that had 4 or 5 albums out. This wasn't just,
like a new band,
3 guys that got together playing in their garage. But that was kind of the deal. Like, if you could make some money back on tips. You can get a little bit of the drink proceeds.
Right.
But the bar was like,
the bar's not taking the risk.
I'm going to take a risk. And it's not only we're asking you to pay for free.
Right.
It's basically like, you need to pay me $200 to get access to my stage.
Right.
Almost, like you'd like rent airtime in the old days on radio.
Right,
right. We'll give you an hour and you can sell the ads. But it was like that for music. And that doesn't happen here. And there was a lot of things like that everyone's in the same boat as far as trying to figure out, what are we doing as far as, lack of record sales, streaming doesn't make us any money, how are we playing live, and how are we developing audiences? And what it came back and showed us is that, there was a lot of good things that were happening here. And that if we could accentuate those, that we'd be in better shape than most of those other markets that we were in, especially when it looked at for jazz.
I got you. Do you find any of those bands were able to attach a product to their music again? Because to me, that's that physical aspect. When we lost that, I feel like that's where we lost our money. Now it's just in the air. It means nothing, when you put songs out. So before it was tangible, it was a physical product. So I feel like when musicians or artists can get something of a physical product that they can sell that works in the music circle, that's when they start actually making money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely see the benefit and the interest in developing merch. And it's just like anything else, though. You need to be able to take it seriously, whether that's bringing in someone to manage it, or having it be the responsibility of one person in the band, where it's like, this is what you do.
Right.
Because, American shoppers, we expect everybody to be Amazon.
Right.
And so, if I order something from you and it's not there in 3 days, I'm
right.
And so, merch is incredibly important, but American shoppers have high standards, and you have to make sure that you are meeting them where they expect to be met.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Well, with so many dropship companies, it's easier to do now. But I agree. You got to take it seriously, and you got to handle the business properly, just like anything, the foundation part of it. But I do truly feel like we have to get back to some type of physical product for our music if we want to really make money in it.
That's exactly right. And there's been a lot of talk about redevelopment of vinyl, and you've seen that a little bit.
It's resurging a little bit, but not everybody's going to go back.
Much. Exactly.
Only
so much.
Yeah, you're not going to get a bunch of people to go back and buy turntables and learn how to use vinyl, because it's a process. It's not like you just pick up vinyl and start playing. Like, you've got to learn how the needles work, and you got to learn how change them out, and it's a full process. It's not quite as bad as tape. My dad used to slice tape, so it's not quite as bad as splicing together tape. But it's definitely a process.
It's a process, and it's also, even for people that buy into it, it's only something they're doing.
It's almost a hobby. And you sit there with a cigar and a drink, and you listen to one album a week or something.
Which does sound rather charming.
It does.
Right? Sign me up.
I'd rather do that. I would rather do that. Yeah, because I feel like you experience music better when you do stuff like that.
100%.
You know,
And so there is, especially for different artists, there is that avenue, but we don't want to oversell it.
No.
The fact is it's now a tool, but it is far from the tool.
No, agreed. I think there should be some type of blend, and maybe you could give me your thoughts on this. I think there should be, and I've thought this way for years, and I think they've tested it a little bit, but there needs to be some type of blend with companies that have products and with musicians and artists. And like to give you an example, let's just say Budweiser. Like, a country artist should be able to release a single out in the air on Spotify, get everybody excited, and then say, hey, my album will only be able to be downloaded on a QR code inside of a Budweiser 12-pack. So everybody go out and buy Budweiser, and then you can download the album. And it's the only way you can do it. And then they do a profit share with the company, with Budweiser. And then that's kind of how you get your product back. But then it works both ways, because then you get an exposure from Budweiser, and Budweiser's getting exposure from your fans. So it kind of works both ways. Something similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still an opportunity to develop a lot of new models. I think that we've gotten to the point now that we've had, iTunes and Spotify and Amazon Music for, 20 years now at this point, really. And we kind of know that does not work for the artist. And I think there was a lot of hope that, okay, well, you give them a little bit of time and it's going to change, and it's going to change, and maybe it's not going to change.
Right.
And so really re-examining what is done, while at the same time getting the product to the fans, because that's an important part of the equation too.
Right.
I think it's definitely time for that conversation.
Well, I think the kicker to really that kind of kicked this bucket down the road of the streaming isn't working for us, and it might actually change it, is when the film industry decided all these subscription services are not really working either. It's not working. They're not getting the same sales that they would, or money they'd be getting selling CDs or DVDs. They're not getting the same people to go see the movie theater. And there's a huge decrease in profit for a lot of these big film people. That's why you see them all firing it. They're firing people left and right, and they're downsizing, and they're doing all kinds of things to try to make it work.
Yeah, and in some ways, the music business for once is ahead of them, because we went through this.
We went through
this a generation ago when the same thing happened. And then,
correct, but nothing changed.
And then the film people did it anyway.
Right.
And, their choice, I guess, but it seems like an interesting decision.
But I feel like they're going to make the change. I feel like that's going to kick the change in gear. Because the music, we never changed. We never went back, to the trunk sale. We should have done website sales and just thrown up our singles on Spotify and just use it as a radio, and just gone back to the at least do something. But I just don't feel like we did anything. We just kept uploading music.
Yeah, that's right. And these days, the numbers of uploads are so insane.
Oh, it's ridiculous. You don't even get paid if it's not over 1,000 streams.
Right.
Which is just ridiculous. But how do you feel AI is affecting the copywriting process for musicians?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see. I mean, it may not necessarily influence copyright that much. That may be something that 5 years from now looks like a completely ridiculous statement. But I think it's much more in the creation aspect of it. And,
Well, and I know a lot of people are working on copywriting the likeliness of their face and other things, because of the facial recognition and things that you have nowadays that are reading your face, and I know a lot of major artists are doing stuff like that.
And there is protection that does come into that name, image, and likeness. Copyright is for artistic works, and as far as right now, the word is copyright. An artistic work has to be created by a person in a tangible form of medium, and be created by a person is the key component that the Copyright Office has gone with, and that the courts have gone with.
So face made by God, I can't copyright.
You can't copyright it, but there are some other protections. But as far as copywriting songs that are AI generated, right now, it's not something that happens. That could change. But I think the major concern is just more in, the lack of creativity that's going to come from not employing a bunch of other session artists, that's not employing, people sitting around and creating things, of just saying, AI will get us to a B level, because it will.
Right.
it's not going to get you that true moment where you're like, I didn't know you could do that.
Right.
That's amazing by definition, because it's feeding off of what's already been done. But it can get you to a decent level. And, for a lot of pop music, for a lot of, backing music that you're going to find in video games, which, you can make good money off of.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be an easy out to not have to deal with having royalties, because
Right.
there is no copyright.
Correct.
And so, the studio creates the soundtrack, and with AI, that has the potential to save them a lot of money, and I know that's going to be attractive to them, and it's going to hurt musician jobs.
But at some point, you lose the heart and soul of everything.
Well, and that's the point, is that I think there's only a level that it's going to get to.
Right.
Because true art is really showing us something that we haven't seen before.
Right.
And again, by definition, it can't do that. So it can get you an 85 on 100
Right.
grade point scale, but it can't get you 100. And that's why we need artists to get us to the stuff that really grabs us. If you think back about when you maybe first got into music or movies or visual art or whatever, the thing that you first saw where you were like, that's unbelievable.
Right.
That I want to be part of all the time.
Right.
That transcendent moment, that's what art brings to people, and that's not done with AI.
Right. No, 100%. Well, even social media, like I keep saying to myself, I'm like, this is going to get really boring when it's nothing but AI comments and fake AI accounts, and there's really no one interacting truly with you. It's a bunch of computers. Like there's no point. It's not social at that point.
It's not
anymore.
social.
Yeah.
And so why am I spending this time on it?
Right.
Absolutely.
So I actually hope we get to that point, because I'd like the people back. I like to talk to people. So, but that's awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit of what you think. I guess the special part of working for a nonprofit. Like, what's the things that you get most out of working with nonprofits?
Yeah. I think that taking the skills that we have and being able to put them into place and seeing how the whole industry develops because of that. We always look at the work that we do at Ella Project. We have a specific set of skills, and we play in a specific niche, and we try and fulfill that really well. And if you add that together with all the other components, medical and healthcare that comes out of the musicians clinic, promotion that comes out of WWOZ and the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, the music clubs and all that. And we have our role too. And if everybody works together,
Right.
then you see the whole scene grow, and you see the city grow.
Right.
And I always have looked at is that I came into this business because I loved the culture of New Orleans, and I wanted to see the economy of the region grow for a selfish reason that I was tired of seeing my friends move away. They were like, oh, I love it here, but I can't get a job here. Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
This is,
Right.
late 90s, early 2000s, and post-Katrina, et cetera. And so it was like, all right, where can you take the skills that you have and the knowledge that you have of the culture? When everyone says, I love the culture, but I wish the economy was better, and be like, all right, well, maybe we can have both.
Right.
We can grow the culture, which then in turn grows the economy. And you see successes there,
Right.
and by no means a panacea. And we all know we have tons of work to do. And an old friend of mine always joked, the worst thing in a nonprofit is if you actually fully succeed.
Right.
You don't have a job anymore.
Right.
Well,
Right.
for good or ill, we haven't fully succeeded. We got
Right.
a lot of work still left to be done, but we're excited to do it.
That's awesome. Well, I would like to maybe talk about doing some stuff with you guys. We have a situation should be happening in the next few months here. We've partnered with Trombone Shorty Foundation, who's going to send us a couple paid interns to work and learn here for a few months. But I'm also at the same time partnered with Master P. Hope Foundation, who is supposed to be picking an artist that Elation's giving a full production deal to. We'll be taking care of all the recording, the production, and mixing, mastering, content creation, all that, Dolby Atmos mixing. So we'll be teaching all that while we're doing it for this artist that the Hope Foundation picked. Maybe we could do a workshop for music business workshop in the middle of all that to teach not only Traveling Shorty kids, but the artists that we're doing this for a little bit about the business itself. And maybe we can just kind of do it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds right up our alley. Sign us up. We'd love to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Well, great. Well, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'd like to know what brings elation to you in your life?
Yeah, I think that it really is a celebration of this local culture, whether that be at a Mardi Gras parade, at a second line, at a club, at an art opening, seeing some of the murals that have popped up around town for the Super Bowl.
Right. Which they painted a little late, if you ask me.
But they got up there. Fair enough. We did have a snowstorm.
Yeah, you're right. I'll give you a week off for that.
And just the joy that it brings to people literally from all over the world.
Right.
That I could walk into a restaurant in Paris and they find out you're from New Orleans and the waiter goes, "Oh, my dream is to come to New Orleans."
Right.
That, our office is in the French Quarter, and so I see people walking the streets all the time and just how happy they are, and that us as locals, as natives, and people that are involved in the culture can help provide that joy to them, and then we get to experience it every day ourselves.
Right.
That's a good deal.
Absolutely. I agree.
Can't ask for anything more.
I agree. The big easy for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us today. You want to tell everybody the socials and where they can find Ella Project and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a series of seminars we're doing in partnership with the city of New Orleans. So we have 3 coming up April 2nd, April 9th, and April 16th. I think your old friend Axel De La Rosa is going to be presenting for us on April 2nd. And we'll have some other good presenters as well, talking about touring, talking about marketing, talking about working with PROs, performing rights organizations, and making sure that your royalties are done. We do those sorts of things all the time. All that stuff is also on our website at ellanola.org, ELLANOLA.org. We capture the workshops that we do, and we put them on demand. They're on YouTube as well. People can click and watch. All our events are free. And then, the typical social media places. We're on Instagram at Ella Project NOLA. We're on Facebook at Ella Project NOLA, YouTube, LinkedIn, et cetera, and around town as well. So Come find us.
Awesome. Well, look them up because they're doing really good things here in the city, and we appreciate you. Absolutely. Doing a great job.
Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed spending some time with you.
Same, buddy. Same. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the Elation Podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow if you'd like to see more.